Welcome back to the History of Early Western Civilization. This is Professor Allen, and here is Lecture Day 15. So, we've got a picture here of the Triumvirate. These are, of course, pictures of their actual statues, and since, thanks to science and computer imaging, we can kind of tell what they actually may have looked like in real life, as above right there in that picture there. So a little bit of interesting modern science going into some history there for you. And of course, we've already covered this triumvirate. We're going to quickly recap what happened last time, just so that we set up what's going to happen this time, okay? Because that's it. What happened last time was setting us up for this entire lecture today. And so the triumvirate was formed in 60 BCE, and it was a kind of backroom deal between these three men in Roman society. Each of them were relatively powerful and popular politically, and of course, two of them, Marcus Crassus and Pompeius Magnus, were major rivals. And they both knew, of course, Julius Caesar, this up-and-coming politician and military officer at different points in his career, and they realized that the two of them could help him out, and then, in turn, they would get something in return from him. And so what he wanted, of course, was the power of the consulship, the elected position of being consul for 1 year, which he would actually become for the year 59 BCE with a man named Marcus Bibulus. But early in January of that year, after an argument that led out into not just in the Senate building, but into the Forum, where eventually manure was dumped on Marcus Bibulus's head, and his life was threatened by some of Caesar's supporters, he stayed in his house and never really came out of it for an entire year. And so during that year, Julius Caesar was in command of the consulship by himself. Unofficially, of course, but it was basically gave him free rein to create a lot of different reforms and things, including making sure that Crassus and his Optimate allies got tax rebates, and that Pompeius Magnus got a bunch of land for his troops to retire on. Additionally, Pompey was able to marry Julius Caesar's teenage daughter, who was about 16 or so when they met, and I think 17 or 18 when she married him. Again, that was typical at the time. Julius Caesar was in return promised by Pompey that some of Pompey's legions would then fight for Caesar when he became proconsul, meaning governor, and so that would give a chance for Julius Caesar to go off and become a military conqueror of some territories. And then they both promised Crassus that later in the future that he would himself get his own time to shine militarily. But first they needed to set up everything else first. So let's move to the proconsulship of Caesar, where he is basically governor. Proconsulship is what happens after the consulship, and of course he becomes governor not just of one province, which originally was going to be Illyricum. He was only going to have the area of Illyricum, which, if we looked at the map here of the Roman Republic, it's that little sliver of land, this here area. And at the time, in the 50s BCE, there wasn't much happening there. Later on, as they start expanding out from there, there's going to be some more activity there, but at that time it was a very boring area. And so Caesar was very upset with that, being his proconsulship, and he didn't want it. And so he kind of worked around to get parts of Gaul. Gaul is, of course, southern France, okay, as well as northern Italy, that little area in the Alps, so northern Italy into Switzerland almost, as well as southern France. And so he gets Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul, these two areas here, as well as Illyricum. And of course, thanks to Pompey helping out, he was able to get not just 1 or 2 legions, but 4 legions, including the veteran 10th Legion, which were nicknamed the Knights. And we all discussed that last time. And so Caesar's proconsulship will be in command of these 3 provinces, okay, for 5 years. Okay, he's going to possibly seek to extend that, or maybe not. We'll see down the road, okay? And so that gives us a little bit of setup. And then last time, at the end of last lecture, I mentioned that Caesar was kind of given an opportunity right away. When he took in command of Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul, there was a large tribe of people here called the Helvetii, which live in present-day Switzerland, or came from present-day Switzerland, and they decided to travel through part of Gaul, one of the Roman Gauls, Transalpine Gaul, into Gaul itself, into the rest of unclaimed Gaul, okay? The rest of Gaul, France, where lots of tribes lived, other tribes lived. And when these Helvetians did this, it caused lots and lots of issues. And so we end up having problems with the Helvetii, okay, as it is basically described. In the year 58 BCE, the Helvetii migrate through here early on in Caesar's proconsulship, so he basically starts to take command and do something about it by the end of 58, early 57 BCE, and these Helvetian tribes from Switzerland start migrating. It was just a peaceful migration at first, but when you have tens of thousands of these people moving somewhere, it's going to cause a lot of issues at times. And so you end up having tens of thousands of people going through an area that is owned by the Romans, and the Romans living there did not like it, as well as a few of the peaceful Gaul tribes that lived in that area of Roman territory also did not appreciate it. And so these peaceful Gauls, okay, that were living here and here, felt threatened by the Helvetii. Okay, peaceful Gauls felt threatened by the Helvetii, and Caesar sent his 4 legions against them, and they end up killing tens and tens of thousands of Helvetii. Tens of thousands of the Helvetii are killed by Caesar's legions. And of course, Caesar has, roughly 20,000 men under his command. Remember, each legion is about 5,280 soldiers, okay? 5,280 soldiers at this time. And so they're very well, and this is kind of some of these soldiers are relatively new. And so it's kind of their beginning into fighting against tribes in Gaul, right here, against the Helvetii. And they drive the Helvetii back into Switzerland. Well, at that point, Caesar kind of realizes he's figured out how the can of worms is opened. He can kind of use an excuse by saying, oh, well, I have to go help out some of the other tribes here that need help against the Helvetii or against other tribes. And so that's exactly what he does, as he travels over the border from Transalpine Gaul into this unclaimed portion of Gaul. Okay? Especially since he kind of finds this excuse that the Suebi tribe starts stirring up problems with other Gauls. Okay, the Suebi tribe is a tribe of French people, okay, or they would be modern-day French people if they were there then, okay, and, of course, these Gauls, the Suebi tribe, start attacking other Gauls, okay? It's just intertribal warfare, okay? And so Caesar kind of goes in and starts fighting against the Suebi tribe. The issue is, and this issue is going to come back and haunt him later on in this lecture, is that the Suebi tribe were actually official allies of Rome. They actually had a formal treaty, written treaty with Rome, saying that they were friends. And so when Caesar attacks the Suebi tribe to help out these other Gallic tribes, it is illegal. He is doing this illegally. He's attacking an ally of Rome because they're attacking other tribes. And he's kind of using it as an excuse to go deeper into Gaul, okay, so that he can start conquering this area, okay? And so when he attacks an ally of Rome, this is completely illegal. And this will become a problem later on, legally, for Caesar. But at the time, he doesn't seem to care, and he's hoping that no one's going to find out about it. Well, they're going to, okay? But again, he's using an excuse to get into this area, okay? And, as you can see, he doesn't just stop there. He's going to continue, well, up and around everywhere throughout Gaul. You can see all of those purple arrows everywhere. Those are all the different places he marches to and marches through and with his army. of 4 legions. Of course, he sometimes separates the legions and only goes with 1 or 2 at the time, and sometimes has another one fortifying somewhere else. But he basically continues through the rest of Gaul, and we have something called the Gallic Wars. Okay, the Gallic Wars are these wars against all of the Gallic tribes, the people of Gaul. Okay, and during these Gallic Wars, in the year 57 BCE, we have the Battle of the Somme, okay, the Battle of the Somme, and that is a battle against the Belgae tribe up here in this area, right around here, the Belgae tribe, which is basically Belgium today, near Belgium today, okay, and it's, of course, northern Gaul at the time, okay, and the Battle of the Somme happens when Caesar and his men are actually marching through the forest in the evening, and they're just marching through the forest on the road, basically trying to get from place to place before setting up another fort or another position, and the Belgae tribe decide to attack them while they're marching. And so it's an ambush, meaning that Caesar's legions were not ready, and Caesar makes a quick speech to his officers, and they in turn tell their other officers below them, the centurions, in charge of each of the centuries of 80 men, okay, which is the smallest division of this legion. And he tells them all to basically rally together and fight as hard as possible. And the centurions basically make speeches to each of their units, telling them, okay, this is what we're going to do, not just in a speech, but also plan. Okay, a plan for what they're going to do. And they all rally together, and they all are able to fight very hard, all of the soldiers. And so they do actually succeed in fighting off the Belgae tribe. So it is a victory for Caesar and his legion, even though they were ambushed, which normally in an ambush situation like that, it's usually the other way around. The people doing the ambushing are the ones that win. Okay, and especially when marching through the forest and you're being attacked from all sides when you're not expecting an attack and not ready for an attack. And another extraordinary thing was, by that time, Caesar's legion had already marched about 10 or 15 miles that day. And so they had marched almost all day long, 10 or 15 miles, as well as then had to fight a battle at the end of it, when they weren't expecting it. So it's quite extraordinary that they survived, let alone won that battle. Well, of course, while he is winning and conquering all of the different areas around Gaul, okay, he does make some writings at this time. In fact, one of the writings Caesar writes is called Caesar's Gallic Wars, okay? And it is actually 5 individual books. I have read them, many people have read them. They were read aloud in the forum, okay, in the town square of Rome itself, of the city of Rome, as well as throughout the rest of the Republic. They were sent, and they were written in third person by Julius Caesar. Meaning that Julius Caesar wrote them himself, okay? But he used, Caesar does this, Julius Caesar did this, Julius Caesar did that, Julius Caesar led the men across this river, Julius Caesar commanded the legions to do this. And the reason he did that, and the reason he wrote it in third person, as opposed to I did this, I did that, is because when they were going to be read aloud in the forum, he wanted the person reading it to be able to state that Julius Caesar did this thing, and Julius Caesar did this great thing else here, and Julius Caesar won this battle with his soldiers, and things like that. And so they were read aloud in public to build up this kind of sense of love of what Caesar was doing in Gaul for the Roman people, is what he kept on basically saying in these books. And it's kind of basically propaganda, where he is pushing his own ideas and pushing his own victories and everything to get people to love what he's doing, okay? And to love him in return. And so, while he is doing that and having these things read aloud for him by other people, okay, in Rome, Pompey and Crassus, his allies in Rome, are beginning to become jealous of Caesar's fame from this campaign. And Crassus, at this point, really wants his military win. he really wants to go off and have his military conquest. He's kind of getting upset. It's been like 2 or 3 years. It's been about 3 years now at this point, and Caesar is getting victory after victory and after victory in Gaul, and conquering tons of Gaul, and eventually going to turn it into another Roman province or two. And Crassus at this point really wants to be able to do that somewhere himself, because he's never really had a military conquest other than against Spartacus and the Third Servile War. And that just really isn't, even though it was a big issue, it isn't counted as a big issue by Rome. They were like, oh, well, they were just slaves. I mean, yes, they were threatened by it, but they still don't feel it as being this prestigious thing. So Crassus really wants it. Pompey, he's had his military triumphs. He's had 3 military triumphs, which is more than most Roman generals ever get. And so he really doesn't care. He kind of cares a little bit that Caesar is becoming very, very popular right now, and he's not as popular anymore, but he's got his own things at home, including his wife Julia. And so interesting things are happening in Rome, other than just Caesar having people read aloud in the forum of what he is doing. And that is a lot of political and civil unrest that is happening in Rome. We end up actually having riots and disruptions in the city of Rome. Full-on riots end up breaking out. And it is because of a major scandal that happens. Okay, and so what's this scandal? Well, Caesar had left one of his allies in charge of being the plebeian tribune. He had made sure that Clodius, that same Clodius that I mentioned last time in Lecture 14 about that dressed up as the woman and broke into Caesar's house when Caesar's wife at the time was having a party, and he was hoping to seduce either Caesar's wife or some of the other women at the party while dressed up as a woman. Well, Caesar basically never accused him of a crime, and actually spoke at the trial to clear him of the name of any crimes, and then ended up divorcing his wife. But even still, Caesar ended up basically getting Clodius on his side by doing that. Clodius is actually a patrician. Okay, he is actually a patrician, but he went, along with Caesar, to a plebeian family that was very wealthy to adopt him, so he could hold the office of plebeian tribune. And that's kind of sketchy right there, right? Think about this. He's a rich patrician family. Okay, he's from a rich patrician family. But to be able to become a plebeian tribune, which is a political office, very similar to consul, but the plebeian version, he had to be a plebeian. And he wasn't. He was not born to a plebeian family. But Caesar wants him in this family, as well does Clodius. And Clodius and Caesar find a family that is willing, for a little bit of money, to write down on legal documents that Clodius has been adopted by that family. Interestingly, the man of the family, the oldest man of this plebeian family, is actually younger than Clodius. And he's now supposed to be the father of Clodius. And it's really just kind of sketchy. People understood this. People started figuring this out. And so they really didn't like it. But Caesar is kind of trying to keep that away by constantly having his books read in the forum. And so a lot of the public are listening to this and not thinking about this. Well, Clodius, at one point, stirs up the crowd to insult Pompey, because Clodius actually doesn't like Pompey as a person. Clodius and Pompey had back history, the two of them, and so Clodius decides one day that he's just going to defy what Caesar's alliance with Pompey is, and start insulting Pompey. And he does it in front of a crowd of other plebeians, of actual plebeians. And this really upsets Pompey, because Pompey is a popularis. He is the one that loves the plebs, and the plebs love him for all of his military conquest and everything else, and always being able to make good speeches. And so Clodius is turning the crowd against Pompey, and Pompey actually is attacked in the streets one day, or nearly attacked in the streets, and so Pompey actually has to run away and hide at home in a very similar manner that Marcus Bibulus did. Not as long, but it's bad enough. Well, Crassus is also possibly involved, because Crassus also didn't really like Pompey, And while Caesar was away, the person that was keeping the triumvirate together is Caesar, because Crassus and Pompey hate each other, and so Crassus might have also been involved and helped out Clodius on this conspiracy. Well, eventually, this man right here, Cicero, is a great orator, a great speech giver. He's a senator. He comes in and establishes peace between the optimates and populares again, and quiets down the masses of the plebs by basically making speeches to the plebeians in the crowd and telling them to ignore what Clodius is saying for a little while and to stop attacking Pompey and stop hating Pompey because Pompey's a war hero and everything else. And then he basically also gets Pompey and Crassus to kind of shake hands and put their issues aside for a little while. Again, not realizing that he's basically mending the triumvirate, and he didn't even know about it at the time. Continuing on, in finally 56 BCE, the triumvirate decides to re-meet because their deal that started in 60 was about to expire. They made a deal that they were going to come together in a few years to rediscuss the negotiations of their deal, okay? And so each of them come back and meet at Lucca, which is in southern Gaul or France, okay? And that's because as governor or proconsul, a proconsul or governor cannot leave their province. And even though Caesar has technically left his provinces by attacking this area, he's counting it as now his area. But he can't go back into another Roman territory without violating the law. And he doesn't want to do that. So they meet in southern France. And the decision at that renewal of the triumvirate is that in 56 BCE, Crassus and Pompey are both going to run for the election of consulship together and be consuls again together in 55 if they can win, which they do. They also are going to eventually, after that 1 year, Crassus is going to be given the area of Syria as governor, okay, the following year in 54, and that he will be able to use that to maybe attack people out in the Middle East, or maybe Armenia or something like that, to get his military conquest. Pompey would be given proconsulship for 54, okay, governor of Spain, which he's basically already controlled before in the past, but they would make sure that in the consulship year of the two of them being consuls, that they would make sure that not only that would continue, him get Spain and Crassus get Syria, but that Pompey wouldn't actually have to go to Spain himself, that he could rule through like other people doing it for him and just send letters back and forth by a legal method called in absentia, being absent, right? Being absent. And so Pompey would be over in Rome and sending letters back and forth to other generals and stuff in Spain to do the work for him. And the reason why was because Caesar would still be in Gaul. His proconsulship is still not over yet, and that Crassus would be over here, and that if Pompey was here, who would be monitoring things here for the triumvirate? And no one would be. And so they decide that one of them has to stay behind, and since Crassus wants to conquer over here, and Caesar is conquering stuff over here, that Pompey, who doesn't need to really want to conquer anything, can live with Julia in Rome itself, okay, and be happy there. And so that's the decision, and sure enough, in 56 BCE, Crassus and Pompey, after signing this deal with Caesar, they go back from southern France to Rome very quickly, and they immediately start running for consulship, and both of them are voted in because all the optimates vote for Crassus, and all of the populares vote for Pompey, and so both of them are now consul for the year of 55. They get a couple things passed for their own things, like more tax rebates and some more land for some more of Pompey's troops that want to retire, stuff like that, minor little things. And then the two of them set up where they're going to be governors of, and they even make sure that Pompey gets to stay in Rome by making that extra little addition for his governorship that he gets to be in absentia. And Caesar is still getting to conquer Gaul for a little bit longer. We will continue with Caesar leaving Gaul and actually going into Germany in the next lecture video.